Hello, everyone. And I just saw a person walk behind my window there. Okay. Yeah, we actually have some workers around our house. I did tell them to please be quiet between the hours 9 and 10. And I hope they remember that, because they're doing a lot of drilling and, replacing wood and stuff. So anyway, so hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our webinar. In our chat on the right, if you want to let us know where you are from, hey Gona, and so we will have a nice mix of audience here, I think, so there are going to be people from my side and from Kate's side. There will be people who know us both and who follow us both already. And but we are actually really excited about this topic today. And let me introduce Kate. Well, maybe I'll do a quick intro on me as well for people who come from Kate's side. So like Kate, I'm a Squarespace web designer. I've used Squarespace since 2008, so a long time. I became a professional designer in 2015. I started teaching Squarespace in 2016. I did both for a few years, and now I teach full-time all things Squarespace, web design, SEO, campaigns, member areas, all of those things. Kate, we've known each other actually for a few years now as well, and yep. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself as well?
So I am also a Squarespace web designer and SEO expert, so we have a lot of overlap there. I also teach Squarespace designers how to build successful Squarespace template shops, and I design templates as well. And I think we're both really excited to talk about this topic because it falls very much within our wheelhouse of SEO and content creation, and how are all of these new AI tools going to affect that entire landscape for all of us. So it's very exciting.
Absolutely. And by the way, if you're ever thinking about creating a template shop, I did take Kate's course and it's excellent. It's really, really good. And so definitely worth checking out. We will also, by the end of this webinar, you will all get an email from us with any links to anything that we mention in this webinar. So we'll probably put links in the chat, as we go through it. But you will also get an email afterwards. And also, for full transparency, everyone who has registered, both Kate and I will have access to that list of emails, and you will be added to our own mailing lists, so you will hear from us. And so in my case, you will be subscribed to my studio notes, which I know many of you are already subscribed anyway. Do you have a name for your newsletter, Kate?
I don't.
Yeah, so Kate's newsletter. and of course, you can unsubscribe, so if you don't want to then continue to hear from us, you just unsubscribe. But we really thank you for the opportunity, to be in touch with you. And we're really excited. Well, I'm really excited about this as well. You may have watched Kate's AI series on Instagram, which was excellent. And she has created now a presentation from that series that she did. It's probably going to take about half an hour. If you want to ask questions, if you're on desktop, we're using Crowdcast. There is an icon with a question mark. That's the Q&A section. Please leave your questions there, and you can also upvote questions in there too. If you are on mobile, you will see that icon at the bottom of your screen. So I'm going to kind of keep a little eye on that, while Kate does her presentation, and then we will answer questions afterwards. So
okay.
Yeah, so let's get started. So Kate will share her screen.
Yeah. Okay, can
everyone
see
me? To myself.
Is everything showing okay? Alrighty, here we go. So I did a mini series on Instagram stories called AI and the Future of SEO. So basically, I'm going to give you kind of a recap of everything that we covered during that series and expand on it a little bit. So we're going to talk about, I'll give you a brief introduction to AI technology and specifically generative AI, which is kind of like the ChatGPT type of AI that generates content. We'll talk about Google's official take on AI technology and whether or not they allow it to be used in content that will rank in search results. We'll talk about 5 ways that you can use ChatGPT to help you write your content. We'll talk about some of the limitations and the ethical issues of AI. And we'll also talk about a few different generative AI tools because there is more than just ChatGPT out there. And then we'll talk about the future of organic search and how AI technology is going to affect that. So first of all, let me just give you a brief introduction to generative AI. So generative AI tools draw from the body of information that they've been trained on to create content in response to a human prompt. So it's kind of like being able to talk to a search engine and the search engine actually talking back to you instead of just giving you a list of links to click on. And there are lots of different generative AI tools out there. So you have image generation tools like Midjourney and DALL-E 2. You have ChatGPT, ChatSonic, Jarvis, which are all kind of content creation tools in a way. You can also ask them questions. You have Ubersuggest now has a suite of generative AI tools that help you with very specific components of your SEO. Like they have a meta description writing AI tool now. And there's things like character.ai, which are a little bit more out there that allows you to create fictional characters and then actually have a conversation with them, which is a really unique and interesting concept. So generative AI has actually been around for a while, but ChatGPT made it accessible in a way that is kind of making it go mainstream. So this is going to change everything because now that everyone has access to it and it's part of the public consciousness, people are going to start using it more and we're going to see the effects of that very quickly. So Google's official position on using AI to write copy on your website has changed. So last year, Google actually said that AI generated content is against guidelines, and search advocate John Mueller actually referred to it as spam. More recently, Google has updated its official guidelines and said that appropriate use of AI or automation is not against their guidelines. And this means that it is not as long as it's not used to generate content primarily to manipulate search rankings. So the question, of course, is what does that mean? What does it mean to manipulate search rankings? And this is where I think that Google has a tendency to be a little bit vague in their guidelines. And I honestly think that they do this on purpose. They've done this in the past. I believe that what they mean by this is that you don't use AI to create kind of the low quality spam content that you sometimes see out there. That, that is not a good use of AI. The better use would be to use it to help you create really high quality content. And I think that if you do that, you're not going to be as prone to getting flagged as spam. So here are some ways that you can use ChatGPT to help you write your content. So my personal favorite way to use ChatGPT is to help brainstorm ideas. I think that the hardest part of the content creation process is really just looking at a blank screen and wondering where to start. And a tool like ChatGPT can give you tons of ideas to just get you started. It's kind of like a launch pad rather than like the rocket ship that gets you all the way to the moon. It's just the thing that's going to help you get started. So here you can see on the right, I have an example of, I asked ChatGPT to give me 10 ideas for blog posts about web design. And you can see that it comes up with some really great ideas. And you don't have to use the specific ideas that it comes up with, but this can really get the gears turning in your head and kind of get the brainstorming process started. It's almost like if you had a friend that you were able to brainstorm with, two heads are better than one. ChatGPT can be your second brain when you don't have another person to bounce ideas off of. You can also use it to generate an outline for your content. So this is kind of taking it a step further. So here I asked ChatGPT to generate an outline from this second idea that it had given me in the last step. And I don't have the whole outline here, but it's a pretty robust outline. I've tested this before against my own content by asking it to generate an outline on a blog post that's on the exact same topic before. And I do think that a human generated outline is more robust and it's a little bit better. But this is a really good place to get started. And then you can kind of tweak and modify from there and make it your own. You can also use ChatGPT to research the topic that you are writing about. And of course, this is something that you can do on Google as well. And I would caution you to not necessarily believe all of the information that ChatGPT provides. It's known to have inaccuracies. But it is a good starting place and it can give you some basic information. It's also a really good place to go if there's a complex topic that you're trying to explain. You can ask it to explain something like you would explain it to a child. And I wouldn't recommend just copying and pasting that into your blog post, but it's a good place to start to kind of get you thinking about your topic in a different way. You can technically use it to write your content for you, but there are some limitations and it's not something that I recommend. First of all, ChatGPT in particular has a hard time producing a long piece of content. So it tends to cut off at about 500 words, I've noticed, at least on the free version. So it's not robust enough, I think, to just create an entire piece of content. The other major issue that I see is that it does tend to plagiarize. So keep in mind that the way generative AI works is it draws from the body of information that it has been fed and it kind of remixes it and then spits it back out in new sentences, phrases, paragraphs, etc. And so that means that there's a lot of stuff that's basically been ripped from the internet and remix and put out there again. And so if you run your content, that's produced by ChatGPT through a plagiarism checker, chances are you're going to see a fair amount of plagiarism. And so that's something you really, really need to watch out for there. So I don't recommend using it to just generate content from scratch. But technically, it does have that capability. And you can also use it to proofread your post. Again, this is something that I don't think it's best suited for. I think you'd be better off using something like Grammarly. But if you need help rewording something or you want to check a paragraph for grammatical errors, or you want to see if there's a better way to word something, it can help you with that. So let's talk about some of the limits of this technology. So AI generated copy lacks personality. It is written by a robot and it sounds like a robot wrote it. So, again, this is one of the reasons why I don't recommend using it to create your content from scratch, because it's not going to have your personality. It's not going to have your brand vibe, so to speak. It's just going to be kind of flat and generic. ChatGPT doesn't always understand context. It doesn't always get that. And so as a result, it can sometimes give you information that is either false or misleading or not relevant. That's probably the most common thing that I've seen, is that if you ask it for something, it doesn't always give you a relevant answer. It also has limited knowledge of niche topics. So it is dependent on the body of knowledge that it was trained on. And that limits it, especially when it comes to, very specific things that, it may not know about. There are AI softwares that are not quite as limited because they have access to the internet. And that is something that we'll talk about in a few minutes. And it's also dependent on the data that you input. So it's responding based on what you give it. So if you give it incomplete data or false data or misleading data, then the answer that it responds with could be, false or misleading or incomplete. So one of the questions that I asked in my series, I actually asked ChatGPT, "Are you evil?" And of course, it claims no. But the question is, how is this going to impact us ethically? Like, how can we best use this technology to really enhance our businesses without using it in a way that is going to cause legal or ethical issues? So, some of the ethical concerns that I have about ChatGPT and generative AI is plagiarism, which I talked about before. It really is baked into the model of generative AI. Again, it's just basically remixing content that real people have already created. And eventually, as more AI generated content, is put out into the world, it will take that and remix that as well. So it's basically a big stew of content um, that has already been created. And so, there's a lot of legal questions that are going on right now. Um, from what I've been able to find out, it looks like you won't be able to copyright AI generated content because it's not your content. So that's something to consider. And when it comes to other types of generative AI, like Midjourney and these image generation tools, that's another huge concern. Is that it's basically taking art by real humans and remixing it into something new. And sometimes that can still pretty closely resemble the original art. So there's a lot of concerns here about basically stealing people's work and this technology using it to create new stuff that may not be as original as we would like to think. Bias and misinformation are rampant right now, and that is something that probably won't affect people in the tech industry quite as much. For our purposes, we're usually using it to write about topics that are pretty innocuous, business tips, things like that. But I do see that as a huge problem in many ways. People who write about political issues or current events, this can be or biographies of real people. This can be a real problem. There have been some cases where it's given false information that could literally ruin lives. There was a case recently where uh, AI said that a professor had sexually harassed a student, and no such thing had ever happened. But it just generated that based on something that it saw and interpreted a certain way on the internet. So there are very real concerns with this technology and how it could spread misinformation. Both in small and big ways. And, we know that AI will cause human job displacement. That's another thing. I think that a lot of companies are going to take shortcuts and they're going to try to save money and use generative AI to write copy, create images, things like that. And that's going to cost people their jobs. It doesn't mean that AI can replace people, but we do live in a very hyper capitalistic society. And um, even if it can't replace humans, companies will do whatever they can to save money. So that's something to be aware of and to watch out for. Um, and to think about as we, as business owners, make decisions about whether we hire someone to do something or we try to do it ourselves with AI. Obviously there are, there are situations where you might not be able to afford to hire someone, but I think that for companies that have the capital and the funds to do that, it's important to consider the human impact here. So, which AI tool is the best? Obviously, everyone knows about ChatGPT, but it is not the only AI tool out there. And so, we're going to explore some of the different tools here. So, the big thing about ChatGPT is that it makes generative AI accessible to everyone, which is fantastic. If AI is going to exist in this way, then it should be accessible. And so the great thing about ChatGPT is that it's free. It's great for brainstorming and generating short form content or outlines or things like that. And so that is really its greatest strength is just the accessibility that it provides. There's also a tool called ChatSonic, and ChatSonic basically offers a lot of advanced features. So it has access to the internet, so it can draw on a much larger body of information, and it's very current information. It also has content templates. So for example, if you wanted to create a Facebook ad, it has a Facebook ad template that you can use. And I think that when you use a specific template for the type of content you're trying to create, it's going to be a lot more accurate and kind of on point than it would be if you just asked ChatGPT to generate something kind of under the large umbrella of ChatGPT, which generates all kinds of things. But it is expensive. So this is the price of using these premium AI tools. They do cost a lot of money, and it can really add up, especially when they start charging you based on word count of the amount of content that you've generated. It can really add up, especially because not all of that content is usable. So you end up paying for things that you don't even use or can't use. There's also Jasper. Jasper is a really interesting generative AI tool that's been out there for a while, and it's a copywriting tool. So its primary purpose is to write copy for you, and it has a bunch of different copy templates that you can use, much like ChatSonic. And the interesting thing about Jasper is that it claims that none of its copy is plagiarized, and it actually has a built-in plagiarism checker through Copyscape. Now, I love Copyscape, but I also know that it doesn't necessarily catch all of the types of plagiarism that are out there, like paraphrasing things. So I actually ran some Jasper copy through QText, which is a much more sensitive plagiarism checker. And the first test that I did actually came back as completely plagiarism free, which I was shocked, honestly. And that was very encouraging. The second test wasn't quite as good. It came back with like 20% of the content was plagiarized. So I don't think that Jasper's claim really stands up to scrutiny. I don't think that it's perfect, but it does seem to have less plagiarism than ChatSonic or ChatGPT, which in my tests had anywhere from like, I think it was 30 to 50% of the, or 25 to 50% of the copy was plagiarized, and ChatGPT was the worst. So that's something to just keep in mind. Just because a tool claims no plagiarism, always verify those claims when it comes to AI. So, what does all of this mean for the future of organic search? Will ChatGPT make Google obsolete? I think that's a big question that people are wondering now. So, personally, I think that the future is uncertain, and there's a lot of speculation out there. There are people, industry professionals, who are saying that ChatGPT will put traditional Google search out of business in 2 years. There are people who say it's never going to happen. There are people who think it'll happen eventually, but not for a long time. So there's all sorts of speculation. I personally don't believe that organic search is going anywhere anytime soon. I think it's possible that eventually it could be made obsolete, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. And one of the reasons I think, from the perspective of someone who uses search engines and who has used ChatGPT, when I'm looking for information on a topic, um, what I like about Google is that I know exactly where the information is being sourced from, and I can choose my sources based on the links that I click on. And with ChatGPT, it just gives you an answer. You can ask it to provide its sources, and it'll give you a list of links. But it's a much different experience, and I think that it really hasn't earned people's trust yet. So that's one of many reasons that I think that organic search is going to be around for at least a while. And, even if it does become obsolete eventually, I still would encourage those of you who care about SEO and who, are thinking about using it as a marketing strategy to continue with that, because even if it is eventually made obsolete, there's a lot of money to be made before that happens. There's a lot of traffic that you can bring into your business within the next 2 years before anything like that, I think, would ever happen. So I don't think that it's a likely scenario that Google is and organic search are going to disappear in 2 years. I don't think that's likely at all. But even if it is, there's still a lot that can be done with organic search in that time frame. So that's that's a lot to absorb, and I know that that's a lot. So let's get to the Q&A.
All right. Oh, hang on. Okay. All right. Thank you, Kate. Oh my gosh, this is just so
Just
fascinating.
information bomb there.
Yeah, but it was, such a great presentation, actually, really, really well done. And, and just really hooking in to your last point, will Google be obsolete? And like Kate said, nobody knows, I mean, at this point, we're so early in the game that we just don't know. My guess is that Google will come up with their own AI tools and they will incorporate their own AI into the search engine.
Yes.
What could happen is maybe the interface will look different. Maybe the way we search and query things will look different. But I think they will come up with their own. I mean, Microsoft have come out with their own thing now for Bing, and I mean, everyone is now scrambling to do this. And I think it's also important to note that AI is actually not new. Like you said, I mean, it's been actually around for a couple of decades. I remember actually a couple of years ago, I bought into this tool called PepperType. It was one of those, oh gosh, what is it called? When you get these software deals, there's this platform where you get these software deals, and they had this amazing lifetime deal. And I thought, oh, okay, that looks interesting. So I bought it and then I tried it. And at the time it was clunky, and it was kind of like the tools you mentioned, where you can say, well, I want to write a blog post, or I want to have a Facebook ad, or I want to, so it's quite specific. But I don't know, I just didn't find it. I found it quite overwhelming, but
Yeah.
they now, the same software, now suddenly I get bombarded. Oh yes, we are doing this and we're doing that. And it's like they've woken up, to the
Yeah.
competition. And but this is not new. It's only now coming into the mainstream. That is what's happening, because ChatGPT made it free,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I mean, the genie is out of the bottle, basically.
Yeah. Very much so.
And there are a lot of questions also ethical, like you said. You made some really good points about that. I think a lot of people are worried. I mean, there are people who have asked the AI developers to stop for 6 months, put everything on hold, please, while you figure out the impact of this. And we all know the futuristic movies, right, where the robots take over the earth and all that stuff. AppSumo, yeah, that's it, Evelyn, thank you. That's exactly the one that I was talking about. So I think, you just raised so many good points, and SEO as such, will not go away, because all that changes now is really the means by which maybe we do search. I tried it the other day, actually. I actually asked ChatGPT some questions. Give me 5 online educators or people who teach Squarespace. I was very lucky. I was very happy that I came up. I was number 2 after Paige Brandon. So I thought, okay, that's good. And I asked a few more questions about specific courses that we teach. And you know what? For all the answers it gave me, every single link was dead. It was not a correct link.
Yeah, I've noticed that. They really, it's not, and I think this is because it doesn't have access to the internet yet, so it can't verify those links. And I think that feature is coming. So hopefully that will be less of an issue in the future, but right now it's pretty bad.
I mean, it's a nice way to get like a clean. So instead of having to scroll through endless links and pages on Google, which are kind of visually also very cluttered, it's a very clean way, but if it was reliable, of course, and
Yeah.
that is always the big thing, and I think, I use AI in Notion, so Notion have an AI feature, and but they take your own content, and they learn your own stuff, and I find it very helpful for taglines and titles, just to get some ideas, because that's what I always struggle with, is like coming up with a good catchy title or tagline, but again, wouldn't it be great if you could do that and it would also know which keywords are good, right? Which are the
Yeah.
good keywords you should use for this topic? I don't think we're there yet, right?
Oh, I tried it for keyword suggestions. I think that it's really important for people to know that this is not a keyword research tool. You should still be using something like Ubersuggest or SEMrush. The ChatGPT is not there yet.
Yeah, exactly. And it probably will be at some point, Well, let's go into the questions. We have quite a few questions now, and remember, people, in the on your right there, the question mark icon, that's the Q&A. You can also upvote questions. So let us start with the first one. Do either of you use AI to generate SEO metadata? If so, can you give some specific examples how you use that? Gona is asking that question. So Kate, what are your thoughts on
I
that?
currently don't use it to generate metadata. The one tool that I would recommend is Ubersuggest. I don't know if it's on the free version of Ubersuggest or if you have to get the premium version, but Ubersuggest has Ubersuggest Labs, and that's where they have kind of their new experimental tools. And they do have an AI tool that generates meta descriptions. And I really like it. I think that it works well. I don't like most of their tools, but I do think that I don't recommend using AI to generate content, but I think it's fine for something like a meta description that is just like, it's literally a short little snippet that's just meant to say what your content is about. So I would suggest Ubersuggest Labs for that. You can use ChatGPT. I don't think that's a bad thing. But I would always, again, just read it over, make sure that it sounds actually enticing, like click on this link, make sure that it sounds good and that it's not just something that a robot wrote. You don't want it to sound like that.
Yeah. And it's kind of like what we literally just talked about, wouldn't it be nice if, AI could give you, like verified keywords, where you would know, yes, this is all the stuff that people search on, so I don't think we're quite there yet. So we still need those other tools. And now I have to say, I don't spend a lot of thought on those things. My metadata, my short descriptions, I usually just describe what it is, and I try to make it, because we know that Google, for instance, still likes things to be very natural, that they don't like keyword stuffing or anything like that. So I just, every now and then I will use some of those other tools like Ubersuggest. Ubersuggest. See, I want to say it the German way. And so but I also try to just not overthink it. It's actually more important that you actually use those descriptions, because many people, like on their websites, they have pages and all that, and they never use those fields in the SEO part of your page. It's actually more important to just go and really use that, and so, but I think eventually we might get there. So I hope that that helped, Gunnar. So let me just go in here. So we've answered that one. Next question comes from Tess. Do you know of any tools or Chrome extensions that will look at the content, of a web page and suggest an SEO-friendly headline or description I labor over these when finishing a client website. That's basically kind of what we just answered, but maybe there's something else that you are aware of.
Yeah, so I actually recommend for headlines, writing good, like really juicy headlines is difficult. I will definitely acknowledge that. I don't think that an AI tool is the best way to do that, though. I suggest a tool called Headline Studio by CoSchedule, and that basically you start by coming up with a headline, and you can ask ChatGPT to generate one for you to start with. Put that into Headline Studio and it will give you a score. It will score your headline, like how good is this? And then you can tweak it from there. And once you use that tool enough, you will get very good at generating really great headlines. It's basically, it just helps you to be better at it. So that's what I would recommend.
Okay. And that works presumably for taglines too, so headlines.
It's just for headlines. That's all it is.
Oh, really? So but would you say that a tagline, because a tagline is quite short as well, does that qualify as a headline too, would you say?
I mean, do you mean like a meta description or like?
For instance, or if you have, like, let's say you have a product, so you have your product, and then I guess the tagline is kind of like the headline, and maybe we're also more talking about blog posts.
I think products are different.
Here,
This is really specific for blog content. So that's what Headline Studio is for. But it makes a huge difference in your click-through rate if you have a really great headline for your content. And I think that nothing beats Headline Studio for coming up with that.
Okay, there we go. Great recommendation.
I've been using it for years.
Okay, that's great. Okay, next question comes from Heather. I am curious about your thoughts on how chatbot search, like Bing's chatbot and Google's Bard, might affect traffic to blog posts. They only seem to link to a handful of sources, and these often tend to be big websites like Wikipedia and Reddit. Do you think the strategy to drive traffic with blog posts will change if this kind of search catches on?
I think it already has changed. I mean, basically, I see like Bard and what they're doing with that as an extension of what Google did with rich snippets, right? That was drawing content from websites and then just posting it on the Google search results page, and it reduced click-through rate. But it also gave greater visibility to certain sources. Now, I don't know what the SEO strategy to get featured on Bard or whatever new AI tools come out is going to be exactly. But I imagine it's not going to be that much different from trying to rank in a rich snippet, which is still a good thing to do. Yes. Does it reduce click-through rate? Yes, but it still gives you more visibility, and you want to be in that number one spot. So I think that we're already seeing a reduction in click-through rate because of that. That's not going to change. It might get worse. But I just see it as an extension of that.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. And by the way, once we've gone through the questions, we'll also have a look at the chat again, in case anyone has some comments on the things that we discuss here. So Ella is asking, can we get a list of the plagiarism testing tools that you prefer for checking online content? So we have Copyscape, which we both use, but I know there are others. Do you have any off the top of your head?
QText is the only one that I think is QText is really sensitive, and it sometimes it will mark things as plagiarism that aren't really. So you do have to go through and actually check each individual thing that it's flagged. But I think if you're checking AI generated content specifically, it is good because you want to be extra careful with that. You want a sensitive tool. The other tool that is really good is Originality, is something that I just learned about recently. And it is a plagiarism checker. I don't think it's any better than Copyscape, but what it also has is it can detect AI generated content. So it can tell you if content is AI generated. And if you want your content to not be flagged as that, to make sure that it looks human generated, then that's a good tool to use to really check and see, well, how much did I change this? You know, is it really making an impact? And I think it's pretty accurate for that. So
Yeah. And now, is there a way, so let's say you have AI generated content and, and Google, you know, I mean, it's going to be interesting. How is Google, how they're going to check? So obviously they're going to have technology that does that, but will you also know? Will you know? I mean, will it be flagged somewhere? Will it be visible to you?
I don't
That,
think so.
So we basically still have to go through the manual effort ourselves, that when we generate content with AI, that we actually go to these tools, the plagiarism tools, run it through that, and just to double check, just to make sure.
Yeah.
Which is why, I still think, that for long form content, you still really want to write your own content.
Absolutely.
And,
Well, and I've mentioned this before, but just because Google says AI generated content is fine now, that doesn't mean that they won't maybe flag something that's, say, 80% or more AI generated and just assume that it's spam because of that.
Yeah.
Google's official guidelines are not all like, don't always take them at surface level because they can be quite misleading sometimes. I do think they do that on purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and I also think, if we, have AI generated, especially long form content, but then we go in and try and, make it our own and change it. The effort to do that can almost be the same as if you just write it yourself, from scratch. And I think there's still a lot of value in learning, how to write good copy. If we are content creators, those of us who are, I think there's still a lot of value in not forgetting those skills of,
Yes.
learning how to write your own content, use SEO tools to make sure that, you have some of the keywords that will help you. I don't see that ever being replaced, and
Yeah, and again, I think that where generative AI is right now, yes, it can create pretty robust content, but it doesn't have the personality. It doesn't have, it doesn't know what your audience wants specifically and what your audience needs. And I don't think it replaces humans at all right now. I really don't.
Yeah. I mean, there are ways, and I've seen that, someone actually demonstrated that the other day, where the tone of voice, right? So you give the AI tool like a written piece of content that you have written in the way you write and speak and all that. And then it will create other content based on that. Like it will identify, I mean, you can actually use, and that's actually what the tool that I had, Peppertype, you give it the tone, like, oh, it's more jovial. Oh, no, I'm more serious. So you can give it some descriptions, and then it will write in those descriptions, and but I don't know, I just really feel like it's don't rely totally on that. But maybe that's also, I don't know, maybe people who grow up now, like really young people who grow up with this, and this is kind of going to be, you don't think for yourself anymore. Let's just ask the computer, and the computer will give me all that. Who knows,
Well, and I think that's, one of the maybe not ethical considerations, but we do have to ask the question, like, how is this going to impact human creativity? And how do we allow it to impact our creativity as individuals? Because I think that it would be a great loss if people rely too heavily on that and lose those skills. Maybe a computer can do it. Maybe a computer will be able to do it better than us eventually. That's probably how it will be. But there's still value in the humanness of something. Do we really want to constantly be reading content that was written by a computer? Personally, I don't. So I think that's something that we have to collectively ask ourselves as individuals. And do we want to take the shortcut, or do we want to go the hard way for our own enrichment? I think that's a valid question.
Yeah, very, very. And I'm right there with you, and I mean, I can certainly see that people will take the shortcut because that's what people want, people do like shortcuts, and but yeah, so, oh my gosh, we could talk about this for hours. So Let's ask the next question. Oh no, sorry, from Ella. Sorry, we've already answered that one. So Tracy is asking, I can definitely see advantages to using AI to help create content and would love some strategies for how to add some extra special humanness to AI generated content to help it stand out in a sea of other AI content. Looking forward to the workshops. Any thoughts, Kate?
I mean, I think the thing is, it's so much harder to add humanness to AI generated content than it is to just generate human content. You know, it's once you start down the path of letting AI do the work first and then you just modify it, you may start by heavily modifying it enough that it really seems human created, but eventually I think you're gonna it's a slippery slope. And I don't always like using that slippery slope analogy because I know that can be misused, but I do think it is going to be a slippery slope to then just kind of like, oh, I changed a few words. It's human generated, you know? I think that human content is human content. So I would start there. I mean, if you really care about creating human content, then do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, use AI as a brainstorming tool. I think that is a perfectly valid, legitimate. It's a great way to use the tool. Just get the gears turning. But then when it comes to actually writing the stuff, that's when it's all on you.
Yeah. And this is basically a continuation of what we just talked about. And I agree, you know, I mean, the way I see it is that long form content, we still write ourselves. And we use AI, you know, and you demonstrated that in your presentation too for brainstorming, you know. And since you mentioned that on Instagram, you know, I've actually been doing that, you know, and it's great. It's really good for that. And also maybe taglines, headlines, you know, and short descriptions. So write your own content, but maybe use AI to then give you a shorter description of what you've just written. You know, I think that is what it's good for, you know, but yeah, you know, I don't know. I mean, it will be really interesting to see how that pans out, you know. And I would also say, you know, Tracy and everyone else, I mean, try it, you know, so try, you know, creating some AI generated content, you know, and then try and make it more human, give it more your voice and kind of see how you feel about doing that. You know, I mean, and then, you know, are you comfortable with that, or do you end up rewriting the whole thing after all, you know, or do you feel like, you know, it's not really that possible to do that? Does the tool learn your voice and your, you know, I think they do. I mean, they are learning tools after all, they're language learning tools. Try it. I think that is probably the best advice we can give, you know, is try it for yourself and kind of see how it feels, you know. So anyway, let's move on to the next question, which actually we have answered. You know, I've heard that Google, so Claudia is asking, I have heard that Google will be outmoded by all the AI SEO. Is that true? We reply, I mean, we addressed that earlier, actually.
Yeah.
You know,
and the bottom line is no one knows.
Yeah.
I said this to Kirsten before we went live, but there are no experts in this space yet because the technology is really too new. Even the creators of ChatGPT and other tools don't fully understand why it responds the way it responds sometimes. So there are no experts in this field. We're just applying our SEO knowledge to this new tool, experimenting with it and sharing what we've learned. But it's a whole new world and we're all going to have to learn along the way.
Absolutely. You know, it's like we said earlier, the genie's out of the bottle, and the people who put it in the bottle, they're like, oh my gosh, you know,
Yep.
the genie is much bigger than we thought. So now we have no control
Yep.
over the genie anymore. And that's basically kind of what it's like at the moment, you know. So next one, does AI software plagiarize from copyrighted web pages? Well, yeah, I mean, does, you know, I mean, it doesn't do any checking, you know, it will just find content and it will use that and repackage it and all of that. So It does. It's worth doing. I mean, you know, Kate demonstrated that in her Instagram story, how you know, like I think ChatGPT was like 42%, right? Of
It
plagiarized
was, I
content.
think it was 49%. It was almost half.
Almost half, yeah.
And
you know.
not all of that was word for word plagiarism. You know,
Yeah.
there is paraphrasing plagiarism as well,
Yeah.
but it was enough that I was like, that's
Yeah.
disturbing.
It is. I mean, the problem with plagiarism is, apart from the ethics, also, you know, Google so far, you know, I mean, doesn't like duplicate content, you know, and you can both get penalized for that, you know, because Google doesn't know who plagiarized what, you know. So that is one of the, you know, big things about that. And but it's also, I mean, we know plagiarism, you know, even human plagiarism happens all the time, you know. I mean, I'm sure Kate has had it happen to her. I've had it happen, you know, where people just take whole sections of pages and just put them on their websites, you know, and for whatever reason. And then dealing with that is not always easy, you know. And you know, what do you do? I mean, do you, you know, contact the people and ask them nicely to take it down? You know, so there's the whole plagiarism thing is pretty rampant actually online, you know. And I definitely, if you have a lot of original content, I definitely recommend to regularly use a plagiarism tool. They're well worth the investment, you know. So
And I think Copyscape is the best for protecting yourself from that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Okay, so actually, oh, sorry, did I just answer the wrong question? Hang on, let me just double check. Yeah, no, that's fine. Okay, do you have thoughts about Bing?
I think
Well,
I said something in my SEO course about nobody cares about Bing. I used to use Bing, but like the market share is so small. I don't think you should be writing your content for Bing. I think you should be writing it for Google.
yeah.
It
I mean,
dominates in every way.
it's easy enough to, I mean, I actually also recommend to set up your Bing, you know, like the equivalent to Google Search Console. You can do that in Bing. It's easy to do. I mean, it's really easy and quick. So I think spend 5 minutes doing that and then forget about it, basically, you know. And every now and then Bing will send you an email, hey, is this information still correct? And you just say yes, and that's it, you know. And I agree with Kate. I mean, Google, I mean, there are lots of other search engines too, actually, you know, like DuckDuckGo and, you know, like the more ethical search engines and all of that. But Google is it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Google is the one, you know. So if
Which is
you,
kind of helpful for content creators because you only have to worry about optimizing for one, you know.
yeah, exactly, you know. So yeah, so no harm in setting up Bing and then forget about it, you know. But if you don't do it, there's probably no harm either. So let's just yeah, that was that question. So Shayna is asking, beyond plagiarism, do you have any thoughts on generative AI and things like harvesting of user data? Yeah, user data.
This is just such a rampant problem in technology in general, from social media to, I mean, Google Analytics harvests so much data. It's a nightmare. I mean, yeah. And this is going to make it worse. I mean,
I think so. I actually just switched to Fathom for my analytics. So I mean, to be honest, I never really used Google Analytics that much anyway. You know, and they've just changed to GA4, and I actually decided, you know, I mean, for me, just being one person company, I like Fathom because the analytics are very simple, you know, and it's basically just what I need, and no more, no fluff. And, you know, they don't collect any data. I can actually turn off the blooming cookie banner on my website, which is
yeah.
nice. And
I would mention though that if you run ads, if you have a business that runs ads and stuff. So I actually used Fathom for a couple of years and I really loved it for the simplicity, but I did end up having to go back to Google Analytics, unfortunately. So I'm
and is that
hoping
because you're using ads?
I could switch back again now because I'm not using ads anymore, but I was running Pinterest ads and you just can't track it as well with Fathom. So
and that's a good point, so you definitely have to go on a use by use case, and I mean, I have never used ads, so for me that, I didn't really need that, but yeah, if you use ads, or if you have more complex operation, then definitely Google Analytics, and of course it's free as well, but yeah, but there are alternatives out there where at least you in your own little universe can do things to protect your customers' data, as best as possible. And and otherwise, I agree with Kate. I think AI is probably just going to make it worse. To be honest, I don't trust anyone on the internet. I don't trust anyone with my data. I know my data is out there. I for instance, I don't use Siri. I always have Siri turned off, and I use a little privacy dot on my computer. Does it make any difference? I mean, use certainly as much care as you can for yourself to protect your own data, especially financial data, medical data, and all of that. But everything is out there, and all these big companies that have your data, never mind the website data from your visit, like from visiting a website, what's someone going to get? An email address, an IP address. I'm more worried about medical data, financial data, and all of those. And we know those big institutions, they get hacked regularly, So there is really, just no easy answer to this.
There really isn't. I mean, I've done everything I can to protect my data, but it didn't matter. I mean, Equifax, everything's out there. I could go to a doctor in another state and they already have all my information. They're not in any way connected to my doctor here. Like, how did they get that? Well, some company is keeping all of that medical data. So yeah, it's not a good situation. I think this is one of those things where the only thing that is truly going to make a difference is legislation.
Yeah.
And our lawmakers, a lot of them don't even know how Facebook works, like we're not this isn't gonna
they know how to use a gun, but
just shoot the computer.
That's right. Let's not get political in here. and of course, but anyway. So I agree though, I agree. I mean, oversight and all of that is and also, why are you seeing ads about something that you've just talked about in your living room? It's like
all the time.
It's creepy, but
And if you're concerned about that kind of thing, by the way, I'll just mention this since, I know that there are people who are concerned about privacy. Webcam covers, you can get little stickers that go over your webcam covers. And also, I can't remember what it's called. I think it's mic lock or something, but there's actually it's like something you plug into the headphone jack in your, or the charging jack in your phone or your tablet, and it blocks the microphone from being accessed completely.
Okay, that's good too. Oops, hang on. I just was showing my privacy dot and then I put it on the camera.
Yeah, I have privacy dots. I have I don't know if you can see my phone case, but this is a Spy-Fi phone case, and it has the cover and it has a front cover as well.
Oh, I like that. Well, we need a link to that as well, actually.
Yep.
We'll remember that, please.
Don't let anyone film you.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Okay. What was the name of that headline tool again? Headline Studio, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's by CoSchedule. I think that there's like another one that someone created that was named the same thing. It's the one by CoSchedule.
Okay. Again, we'll send you links to all of these things afterwards as well. Thanks. Yeah. Amy says thanks. You're welcome. So let's see. We still have 2 more questions left. We have a couple more minutes left. So Evelyn is asking, if ChatGPT isn't sourcing from the internet, how can it plagiarize copyrighted web pages?
So ChatGPT was fed a huge body of information to start with. Well, where did that information come from? The internet, so that's how, and when it has access to the internet, it will be worse. I mean,
Yeah.
it'll be a better tool, but it'll be worse in terms of being able to plagiarize more
Yeah.
stuff.
I mean, wasn't there like a cutoff point, like up to that point they have all the data and
Yeah, so basically, I think it was September 2021 was the cutoff point. However, they do updates. So it's a little bit misleading to say that like it only has information and knowledge up to September 2021, because they did give it more information later on. It just doesn't have access to the internet, so it's not fully up to date on everything.
Yeah. So it's not live access as you're asking the questions,
Not yet. It
But-
will be.
I'm sure it will be. Okay, so last question, and I will have a quick check in the chat too. Kay, I guess that's me. How did you find that someone had plagiarized your web content? What can we do to protect our human created content from being plagiarized? Is it a good idea to note on your blog that it is not AI created? I think that's a good idea, actually, to make a note of that, that this is my own content and I did not use AI. I think people will appreciate that. I found out that someone had plagiarized me. I think originally, actually, someone else came across it and they told me, and then I thought, oh, okay. And this was many years ago. And so then they told me about this tool, Copyscape, and I ran my website through that. And oh my gosh, I actually was on 6 other designers' webpage, my content, and who had copied word by word. And then a lot of other ones with, patch phrasing and all that. So now, since then, every now and then I will use Copyscape. I will run my website through that. And then I'll see, and I mean, actually just a few weeks ago, someone had copied an entire blog post of mine. And so I contacted that person. They took it down. They never emailed me back. They never responded. No, sorry, no, nothing. So it happens, but I have a blog post on plagiarism, actually, where I share those tools, where I share your options. Some people do cease and desist letters. I mean, there are various things that you can do, various steps, that you can take. So I will share that link to that post in the email as well that you get, and have a look at that. That will be helpful for that. But I like your idea, Claudia, of mentioning actually that this is not AI generated content. I love that. So that was our last question from the Q&A. So let's have a quick look at here, Ella she left us a few links here as well, so we will use those in our emails. And yeah, I know, Angela, copying your word, and I'm not the only one. This happens to a lot of people, actually, and I have heard everything from, oh, your content is so good. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Well, what does that mean, right? That's what someone told me once. I couldn't unsee it, and others say, oh, I just used it as a placeholder, until I had time to update it and make it my own. I don't know what goes through someone's mind when they literally copy a whole page of someone else and then put it into their own website. I mean, physically go and do that and hit the publish button. What goes through your mind when you do that? I don't understand it, very bold, I know. But unfortunately, it happens a lot, and people have also had course content stolen, the free PDFs that we give out, people copy those and then sell them, and it happens. Yeah, in photography world, they have Plagiarism. Maybe we'll do a webinar on plagiarism. Maybe that's the topic for the future, to talk a little bit more about that. And anyway, so yeah, so I hope that this was helpful. Do you have any final words, Kate?
I think that as we move forward into this new landscape, I would just encourage everyone to make a conscious effort to retain the humanity of your business, of your content, all of that, because it is valuable. It matters. And I know that's coming from maybe not a logical place, just an emotional place, but I do think that, we need to be careful. When the internet came out, everyone, we kind of all just went along with it and got swept up in the tide. And it has had an impact on how humans connect and all of those things. And sometimes those effects are positive and sometimes they're negative. But if we could do it all over again, which we have the opportunity to do now with this new technology, how would we move forward? And asking that question, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and I couldn't have said it better, so let's remember our humanity, let's remember being human, and I think that is probably the best advice, and the best way to conclude this. Kate, I will ask you to stay on, but I'm going to turn this off now. Everyone, there will be a recording available at the same URL, so you just come back to the URL of this webinar, and you will be able to watch the replay as well. And you will also get an email from us. And thank you so much for showing up today.
Yes.
Until next time. Okay, so let's stop this. And